Hello guys, and welcome back to Web Dev Mobile Dev. In this full tutorial on our full course on HTML and CSS for beginners, we are going to get hands-on and build our first web page. So a general overview of the workflow before we get into coding. So what's going to be happening is we are going to be creating an HTML file, and what you have to do is to create a file and give it a .html extension. After you have created this HTML file, it's going to be interpreted by any web browser which you have installed. In our case, in this tutorial, we installed Google Chrome in a previous tutorial 2 of this series. So after you have created this HTML file, the web browser is going to interpret it and display the content appropriately. So let's see what happens. This HTML file is actually a file which is all about HTML elements. So you notice that an HTML element is just a series of opening and closing tags with some content in it. So you have the tag name, you have some content in it, and you have the closing tag. The opening tag and the closing tag is what constitutes an HTML element. If you look at this HTML file to the left of this slide, you notice that the first main element is the HTML element that surrounds the whole content. The HTML element has its own content, which is all what we see inside here. Inside the HTML element is the head element. So the head element has its own content, which is the title element, and the title element has its own content. So if you look at all this, it's just a series of tags nested in each other. We call this pattern a nested pattern. You have the HTML, the head inside HTML, and title inside HTML, inside the head. The body will have the paragraph also with some content in it inside the body. So this is just the general structure of HTML. Okay, so let's hop now into VS Code and start coding our first HTML document. We are going to create the file and we'll start coding HTML right away. So we just saw that in order to create our first web page, we need to create an HTML file which is going to be interpreted by the web browser to display. So let's go ahead and create a folder on our desktop. So let's just call the folder first web page. Let's just call the folder first web page, and in this folder, this is the folder in which we are going to create our HTML document. So what we are going to do is we are going to open, if you remember in the previous tutorial 2 of this series, we went ahead and downloaded VS Code and Google Chrome, which we are going to be using for programming in this tutorial. So we are going to go ahead and open this folder using the VS Code we just downloaded. So when we go ahead and open this folder in VS Code, we are going to create our HTML file in the folder, and that's where we are going to be doing our coding for this tutorial series. So if it's the first time you installed VS Code, it's going to take some time to load VS Code, so you just need to be patient. So after you have installed VS Code and opened the folder in which you are going to create your file in VS Code, you need to create your file. There are 2 ways of creating the HTML file. Either you click on this icon with a plus there, or you can right click here and create a new file. So anyways is the same. So you can choose to click on the icon to create a file. You need to name the file index.html, which is usually the name given to the first file on the website, the main file on the website. Because when you navigate to any website, the index.html file is the file which is loaded as the first page to the website. So after creating this HTML file, you can start coding. As we saw, the general structure is you start with HTML. That's the first tag, and you notice that VS Code automatically fills in the closing tag once you type the opening tag for HTML. Inside that HTML, you need now to the head tag for the head element. So you type head, and VS Code is going to put the closing tag. So you notice that the HTML, the head is this a tab for the head, as there's some space here, and this is called indentation. So each document has to be indented. Inside the head, we know we have to give the title for our web page. We are going to give it a title. We are going to give it a title, and let's just call it my first web page. My first web page. So you notice the indentation, the head, the title is indented into the head. After the head, we need to have a body. The body is where the actual content of the website is going to go. So in the body, you can have a head, you can have a heading for the website. Let's just call it still that's an H1. So we are going to see, don't bother if you don't understand any of these tags for the moment. We are going to dissect all these tags as we go through the next tutorials. This one is just meant to show you how to display your first web page, and from there we'll explain more details. So in the heading, you can see, you can name this my first web page. So the title and the heading can be the same. We are going to see why when we are going to run this file in our web browser. So after the heading, we need now our paragraph. So you see that this was the title, this is the heading, and we can now have now the paragraph that is going to show, is going to be displayed in the browser. So the paragraph, we can say, I am excited to start learning HTML and CSS. So congrats, you have your first website programmed. So with this, I'm going to show you the easy way. So you have to go ahead and save this file. Control S to save this file. Then what you do is, after you have saved the file, you can now go to your desktop, to the folder where you created the file. You are going to see the index.html, which is the code, the file we just created. What you do now is you right click on this file and you need to open it with Google Chrome. So you have open with, you take Google Chrome, which was the one which we installed, and there you have it, your first HTML page. So if you notice here, we have this my first web page and my first web page. This one is the title and this one is the heading. So if I go ahead and I minimize this and I open VS Code, at the side, let's minimize this also. You notice this heading, this title, sorry, my first web page, is what we see up here, and the heading, my first web page, is now what we see here. So this one is the name given to the tab on the browser, and this one is the heading you actually see. Then the content, now I am excited to start learning HTML and CSS, is what we see. The paragraph is what we see here. So that's it. Congrats on creating your first web page, and we can now go now into advanced concepts. So the first thing we are going to see is, let's change this into something more meaningful. My first web page, okay, let's include now more content, like let's say maybe web development. Then inside web development, what you can see is, okay, building that, let's call that one H1. Let's call that one H1 web development. And this paragraph, in this paragraph, let's say building web pages and web applications for users around the world. Okay, with that, let's call that our H1. We can give now an H2. So that's the first heading. So you know that we have this H1 up to H5. We can now have an H2, which is a smaller heading. We are going to see that after we run it on our web browser, that the H2 is smaller than, but it's still another heading. So let's give the H2 let's say become a web developer. It's our H2. So what can we now say here for becoming? Let's give it some meaningful content. So after becoming, let's give another paragraph. And the content for this paragraph, let's say web development is what can we say? Let's just say it's fun. Yeah, and that's the truth, it's fun, and there is a career path for everyone. Yeah, and this is a career path for everyone. So after creating this page, we can still go ahead and save the file. And when you save the file, if you go back to your web browser, which you had opened at the left, if you remember, what you can see is if you refresh the page, it loads the content. It just loads the new modifications we typed in here, web development and become a web developer. So it loads the content to the right after you refresh the page. But if you don't want to be refreshing over and over, what you can do is there is an extension in VS Code, a package. If you come to packages, extensions, there is a package in VS Code to an extension called Lifesaver. I've already had Lifesaver. I already have Lifesaver installed. So what you have to do is, this is the extension Lifesaver. If I come to Lifesaver, you see that they tell me that it's already enabled, and yeah, see uninstalled. But for your case, if you search Lifesaver, what you have to do is to come here and search for Lifesaver, and you are going to see now the possibility of installing Lifesaver. After you have installed Lifesaver as one of your packages for VS Code, what you have to do is just to simply come back to your HTML file, and any change you make or any modification you make, you can open the file in Lifesaver and it's going to live reload on its own, automatically reload without you going to refetch your HTML document. So what you need to do here is, let's say if we include another paragraph, if we copy down these paragraphs, and with this I'm using a shortcut Alt Shift and the down arrow key, you can duplicate these lines down. I just want to show you that you can open this with Lifesaver. If you right click and you take and you go with open with Lifesaver, you see that it automatically opens the browser and you still have the same content which we had earlier opened with Lifesaver. And you notice that if we minimize this, for example, and if we make any modification to this our code, is going to automatically reflect in our navigation pane. So let's say maybe if we add another heading, let's say maybe we'll add another H2 and say language. It comes to languages to learn. So you see that if I save now this file, it's going to automatically refresh here, and we see that our updates being shown on our web browser. If we add another paragraph, let's say we'll add an HTV. We say HTML, and we save. You see that it automatically saves it, and we have our updates being shown here. So that's all about HTML, and HTML is all about these tags, all about these elements. In your body is the content you are going to see on your web browser. So one more thing before we can call this an HTML document. It's a very important annotation that we have to take note of, and it's the Doctype Declaration at the top of our HTML document. So we have to come to the top of our HTML document and add a Doctype Declaration. You see that VS Code automatically suggests that for me. So this Doctype HTML is a very important declaration. We said every HTML document has to have an opening tag, a closing tag, and some content in it, like we see with the HTML, the head, opening, content, closing, the body, opening, content, closing, title, opening, content, and closing. But this Doctype declaration is an exception to the rule, and it's a very important declaration because the browser is going to interpret this as an HTML document. It's only with this Doctype declaration that our browser can know that this is an HTML5 document. So we have to add the Doctype declaration there. We notice that if we save and there is the live refresh, the live reload, we notice that nothing changes in our HTML document. Like if you view the full HTML, nothing changes. The Doctype declaration is just there to make the browser know that this is HTML5, and it's very important. You have to include that in all your HTML, files. So with that, if there is a remark you have noticed that this web page is not that stylish, it's just some basic text with, and that's all what HTML is all about, basic HTML. There are more tags to HTML, more elements like the button element, image element, paragraphs. We just saw the paragraphs, and there are many more. We are going to see those in the upcoming tutorials. And as we saw in our previous tutorial, which I'm going to link in the card above, we saw the rule HTML please on a web page. We saw the rule CSS please and the rule JavaScript please. So basically what we are doing here is just satisfying the rule HTML please. We are just going to give all pages the structure, and all the elements on the pages are HTML elements. When we are going to go to our CSS tutorial, we are going to be styling this web page a lot more. We are going to make it look more attractive, and that's the role of CSS. So you are going to stick along through the next tutorials to learn more about HTML elements. So a summary of what we saw in this video: we saw the general structure of an HTML document. We saw that an HTML document is just made up of HTML elements, with these elements nested inside one another. Each element had an opening tag and a closing tag with some content in it. We went ahead and created our first HTML file, and we were able to open that file in a web browser. We saw two ways of opening an HTML file. The first way being by clicking on the file and opening it with your web browser, and the second way was using a package in VS Code called Lifesaver to open the file. We saw what indentation is all about, which was just giving space some tabs at the start of an HTML element, spacing out these elements such that it can be easily understood by another developer or by you in the future. We saw how VS Code helps us in web development. The fact that VS Code automatically completes our code. When you type the opening tag, it gives the closing tag. And we also saw the package Lifesaver in VS Code, which helps us to automatically reload the website and the web browser in such a way that we don't need to reload on our own. Immediately we make a change, it reloads the content. We also saw the shortcuts I use: Alt, Shift, and the down arrow key to duplicate content. So if you add value in this content and this tutorial, consider subscribing to this channel. In this tutorial, we just created our first HTML page, which we viewed in a browser. We didn't pay attention to detail. In our next tutorial, we'll be paying much attention to detail, explaining all the elements we use. We'll look at more interesting HTML elements. We'll add images to our web page. We'll also create a website with links to other pages.